There are moments in life when a person steps out of the shadow they were born into and begins to cast one of their own. For Shiloh Jolie, that moment has arrived, and it came not with a grand press conference or a carefully staged media appearance, but through a quiet, deliberate series of choices that together form one of the most personal announcements a 19-year-old could ever make. The daughter of two of Hollywood's most recognizable faces has spent most of her life in the background of someone else's story. Now, for the first time, she is writing her own, and the world is just beginning to pay attention. Just days ago, Shiloh appeared at a private dinner in Los Angeles celebrating collaboration between designer Isabel Marant and Net-a-Porter. The event itself was relatively understated by Hollywood standards, gathering a selected group of guests without the usual fanfare of a major industry showcase. But what happened inside that room sent ripples far beyond the fashion world. Shiloh was not there as a guest. She was not there as someone's daughter. She was there as a professional, credited officially as the choreographer behind a live dance performance set to singer Luella's track Naive. The performance featured trained dancers Keone Rose and Takao Suzuki, and Shiloh stood behind the entire creative direction of the routine. For anyone who had been following her journey quietly, this was not entirely surprising. For the rest of the world, it was a revelation. But the choreography credit was only part of what made that night significant. When the official press release was distributed, the name attached to her work stopped people in their tracks. She was not listed as Shiloh Jolie Pitt, the name most people had known her by since birth. She was not even listed as Shiloh Jolie, the name she had legally adopted after turning 18. Instead, the name that appeared on that press release was Shir Jolie. 2 words. Simple, stylized, and entirely her own. It was the first time that version of her identity had appeared in any professional context, and the response was immediate. People understood almost instinctively that this was not an accident or a casual shorthand. This was a statement, delivered softly but with unmistakable intention. To understand why this moment carries the weight that it does, you have to go back to what happened the moment she turned 18, on that birthday. Rather than celebrating the way most teenagers might, Shiloh took a step that very few people her age would even think to take. She hired her own attorney, paid for the legal work herself, and formally filed to have the name Pitt removed from her surname. The request was processed, approved, and she officially became Shiloh Nouvelle Jolie. What made this decision stand apart from the way it was initially covered in the press was the complete independence behind it. This was not orchestrated by her mother's legal team. It was not a reaction to media pressure. It was a young woman, newly adult, deciding with full clarity how she wanted to be identified for the rest of her life. When a notice about the name change appeared in a Los Angeles newspaper, some outlets interpreted it as a form of public announcement, a deliberate move to make the transition visible. Her attorney stepped in quickly to clarify that the publication was simply a required legal step in the process, nothing more. That clarification mattered deeply, because it reinforced something important about who Shiloh is becoming. She was not performing this change for an audience. She was completing it for herself, following every necessary procedure quietly and without drama. The legal representatives involved also described the decision, using language that gave the public a small but telling window into the emotional weight behind it. They referred to it as an independent and significant decision following painful events. Those words were chosen carefully. They acknowledged that something difficult had shaped this moment without exposing it fully to public scrutiny. And in doing so, they said everything that needed to be said. The backdrop against which all of this is unfolded cannot be separated from the decision itself. The years-long legal battle between Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, one of the most prolonged and publicly documented divorces in Hollywood history, finally reached its conclusion after nearly a decade of disputes. Throughout that entire period, the couple's children grew up inside an environment defined by tension, legal complexity, and a kind of emotional weight that most adults would struggle to carry. By the time Shiloh and her siblings reached adulthood, they were not responding to a single event or a single moment. They were responding to years of accumulated experience that had quietly shaped how they see themselves and how they choose to move forward. What makes Shiloh's story particularly powerful is that she has not made this transition through words. She has made it through work. Her dedication to dance has been visible for years to those who knew where to look. Choreographers and instructors who work with her share clips online that show consistent improvement, real discipline, and a commitment that went far beyond what someone pursues casually. But those glimpses reached a limited audience. Everything changed when she appeared in Diane Seth's music video for the song What's a Girl to Do? The response was immediate and came from people who had no prior emotional investment in her as a celebrity child. They were reacting purely to what they saw on screen, and what they saw was someone with genuine presence, technique, and control. Comments focused not on her famous parents, but on her performance itself, and that distinction meant everything. What is especially striking about the path Shiloh is choosing is how deliberately it keeps her away from the most obvious routes available to someone with her background. She could have pursued acting. She could have launched a brand. She could have taken any number of doors that open automatically for children born into the kind of wealth and recognition she was. Instead, she chose choreography, a field that operates largely behind the camera, where recognition comes slowly and is built entirely on craft. It is a harder road precisely because it does not trade on visibility. It demands that the work speak for itself. And Shiloh appears to understand that completely. By choosing this path, she is not rejecting her background so much as refusing to let it be the only thing that defines her. For Brad Pitt, watching all of this unfold from the outside has been described by those close to him as one of the most emotionally complicated experiences of his recent life. He is said to be genuinely in awe of her talent. He respects the direction she is taking and, according to reports, feels a real sense of pride when he sees how far she has come. But pride and loss have a way of existing side by side. And for him, each new milestone she reaches is also a reminder of how much distance now separates them. Shiloh was once described as a child he felt most naturally connected to, someone whose personality and energy aligned with his in ways that felt effortless. The contrast between that description and the current reality makes the situation feel less like a gradual drift and more like a rupture that neither side has yet found a way to fully address. Rather than pushing for contact or attempting to force a reconciliation that is not ready to happen, sources indicate that Pitt has made the difficult choice to step back and give her space. He is not absent by indifference. He is absent by restraint, waiting in a position that requires him to accept uncertainty, while hoping that time and distance will eventually create an opening. Those who know him say he believes that Shiloh holds a unique place among the siblings, and that how their relationship evolves could influence the broader dynamic within the family. That belief only adds to the weight of what he carries, because it means the personal and the familial are deeply intertwined in a way that makes patience feel both necessary and almost unbearable. Shiloh's story also does not exist in isolation within her family. A pattern has been forming gradually, made up of individual decisions by multiple siblings that, when viewed together, tell a coherent story about how this generation of the Jolie Pitt family is choosing to define itself. Zahara introduced herself publicly as Zahara Marley Jolie at a sorority event at Spelman College, making no mention of her father's surname in that defining moment. Vivian was credited as Vivian Jolie in a Broadway playbill, while working alongside her mother on a theatrical production. Reports have also surfaced suggesting that Maddox has, in certain non-legal contexts, aligned himself with the Jolie name as well. None of these decisions were coordinated into a single announcement. None of them came with a press tour or an explanation. But together, they form a trajectory that is impossible to misread. What Shiloh has done differently is that she has tied her identity not only to a name, but to a body of work. The emergence of Cher Jolie as her professional identity means that going forward, every credit she earns, every performance she directs, every collaboration she enters into will carry that name. It will build its own meaning over time, separate from a name she was born with, and separate from the stories that surrounded her childhood. That is a quiet but profound form of power, and she is exercising at 19 with a level of clarity that most people take decades to find. The announcement, if it can be called that, was never made in a single moment. It unfolded across a legal filing, a music video, a choreography credit, and 2 carefully chosen words on a press release. Taken together, they amount to something far more substantial than any formal declaration could have been. They represent a young woman who looked at the identity she had inherited and decided, calmly and without apology, to build something new alongside it, not to erase what came before, but to move beyond the point where it was the only thing people saw when they looked at her. There are still questions that remain open. The family dynamic that has shaped so much of this story has not resolved itself into any clean conclusion. The distance between these children and their father is real, and whether that distance narrows over time is something no one can predict with certainty. What is clear is that Shiloh is not waiting for resolution before moving forward. She is not pausing her own growth while the larger picture sorts itself out. She is building, creating, and defining herself in real time, which is perhaps the most honest and courageous thing any person can do. For the world watching from the outside, this is the moment to begin seeing Shiloh Jolie not as a product of her parents' story, but as the author of her own. The name Shir Jolie appeared on a press release just days ago, and it may still be new to most people. But if the path she is on continues the way it has begun, that name is going to mean something entirely of her own making, and that, more than any announcement she could have made, is the most powerful thing of all.